Welcome back to the More Life podcast on episode 12. Inside 30 minutes, we're going to talk to you about making and breaking habits, what are habits, how do we create them, and how shrimp-like Kyle's cock is. Let's get into it. So, after this 30 minutes, you're going to know how to make new habits and break the old shitty ones you don't want to make. So, little fun fact just to start off. Most people that set New Year's resolutions will give up their resolution within a month. Crazy. And of the 41%, there was a study done in America, of the 41% of Americans that made one, only 9% achieved it by the end of the year. Another little one here. 6 months after setting one, only 46% of people were still sticking to it after 6 months. This does back up the fact that if you do set a resolution, you're going to be able to stick to it, more than likely if you don't set one. But that 9% achieved it by the end of the year. So, of the 41% that actually made a resolution, only 9% achieved it. So, that number is very, very small. Okay, so it's quite clear that there's a problem when it comes to sticking to habits and adopting new ones and being able to stick to it. And what we're going to discuss in this next 30 minutes will give you an idea of how you can make new habits and break the old ones. So, what are habits and why do we have them? Habits are behaviors wired so deeply that we perform them almost automatically. So, for example, you don't wake up and deeply think into brushing your teeth in the morning. It's a habit. I hope it's a fucking habit. Okay? Hope you do that automatically. But it's something that you don't have to think too much into. There's other things that you will do automatically that might not be serving you right now, and that's why we're going to be speaking about how to break them in this 30-minute podcast. So, why do we have habits? Okay, I actually didn't know this before doing a bit of research, but habits are actually handy prehistoric devices that were given to us due to thinking and making decisions taking up so much time and energy. Habits actually save that, right? They were given to us by our ancestors to save us time and energy. If you had to deeply think into all the small things that you can do automatically, like brushing your teeth, there would be so much energy going out and so much energy wasted on doing those things. So having habits built into our brains actually save us time and energy, and it's something that's been given to us by our ancestors. One little thing as well that I found out was, once a habit is formed and formulated in your brain, they never ever die. It's in your brain forever, which is absolutely crazy. So once you've formed a bad habit, it's in somewhere in your brain that is always going to be there. You're never going to get rid of that bad habit. It's always going to be in your brain. So this is why we need to think about making new ones so we can replace those bad habits, because they're always going to be there. So if there's a hole sitting there and there's not a new habit formed, that bad habit will come back in and you'll start to act accordingly with that bad habit. So there's a little experiment done with rats in a maze, right? It was a T-shaped maze, and they placed the rats in the maze and they put a little bit of chocolate somewhere in that maze. And obviously the rats could smell the chocolate, right? The first time the rats were placed into the maze, their brains were going crazy. They had these little electrodes attached to the rats' brains, and the rats were going fucking crazy, right? Once they'd found the chocolate one time, they then placed the rats in the maze again, and the rats' brain activity was close to zero because they knew where to go. They had formed a habit of where to go in order to get that chocolate. They were on autopilot. So after the first time they'd found it, they were then put on autopilot, or they were in autopilot when they were put in the maze, and they could just find the way to the chocolate. This is the same way when you form a habit, you just automatically do the thing without actually having to think too much about doing the thing. So there's a thing called the basal ganglia, which is, we can call it the habit control center. And when you form a habit, right, it's called a habit loop. So you form a habit loop. The three components of a habit loop, okay, the 3 steps to forming a habit loop is the cue, the routine, and the reward. So for the rats, when they were placed in the maze, the scientists, they actually made a clicking sound, and that would be the cue. The clicking sound when the rats entered the maze would be the cue. The routine would be the rats walking through the maze to find the chocolate, and the reward would be the chocolate. So this habit loop allowed the rats to go into the maze and just automatically go towards the chocolate because the habit loop was formed from the cue, the routine, and the reward. If we go back to the point of habits never dying, right, and you always have, once they're formed, they'll never go away. they done a thing where they put the rats into the maze, and say they had to go right with this routine and the habit they'd formed to get the chocolate. They had played about with their brains and made them forget that they had to go right. Therefore, the rats started to go left. After they started to form the new habit of going left instead of right, because the old habit of going right was taken out their brain by the scientists, don't ask me exactly how, they started to go left, right? They then altered the rat's brain to stop going left, and didn't give them any other kind of instruction or alter their brain in any other way, and they went back to that old habit. So this backs up the point that the initial habit that was formed, the old habit the rats had of going right to find the chocolate, they went back to that as soon as a new habit was broken down of going left. Just to reinforce, once you have a bad habit, it's never ever going to die. So you can forget and replace them, but they'll never die. So this is what we're talking about. When you've got a bad habit right now, it's always going to be a part of you. So for example, me and Jack, what's our bad habit that we've had since we've been a bit younger? Maybe smoking. At one point, maybe smoking a bit too much weed. That was a bit of a habit. It's very easy for us, or at least our brains, to some degree, would smoke every day and fall into that habit if we didn't form new habits, if we didn't replace it with new things. So, thinking about the fact that habits can never die, right? And we're always going to have them somewhere in our head. This can help us break them, okay? But if the cues, the routine, and the reward are still present in your environment, how do we sustain new ones? We need to understand, okay, that we need to become more aware. Firstly, of the cues, the triggers that are causing you to go into these bad habits. We need to be more aware of these. One non-negotiable before we speak about that is repetition. So for us to have any control in what we're going to be doing, make any changes that are going to last, we need to have repetition. To untrain or retrain this unconscious part of our brain that's formed the habit loops, we need repetition. So you need to be prepared for repetition. You're not going to be able to adopt a habit tomorrow and it will stick. We need to repetitively do these things in order to retrain the brain, okay?
Approximately it takes 66 days to form a habit, give or take. So first couple of weeks of trying to create a new habit or replace one, it's going to be a battle. It's going to be something that you need to actively hold yourself accountable towards to overcome the response to just fall back into that old habit or not form the new one.
So surprisingly, the 66 days is actually bullshit. Doing this research is actually subjective to the person, so it's not necessarily 66 days.
I'm pretty sure there's statistics that show that.
There's new ones showing that that's subjective. So the new research has showed that 66 days is, I mean, you could say that's a kind of average, but it's different for everyone. So I wouldn't kind of stick to something for 66 days and expect it to stick, because it might not for you. It might take longer. It's subjective to the individual. Okay, so rule number one.
Well, it was a range, but I've just looked it up, so fuck you, mate. An average of 66 days was required to form a habit, with a range between 18 to 254 days. So anywhere between like 2.5 weeks to nearly a year.
So
but on average, it's 66 days. Mate, if you do anything consistently for a couple months, mate, it's gonna fucking
100%.
stick.
But
It's
you
a
can't
fact.
expect 66 days to be a magic number. It's very subjective. So rule number
Thing to
one.
work towards, isn't it?
Rule number one for making and breaking habits. Shut the fuck up, mate. Rule number one for making and breaking habits, right, is understanding that stress is your puppet master. You know when you're stressed out, you're gonna be more likely to eat the chocolate. You're gonna be more likely to go off track, right, and start doing the bad things that you know you shouldn't be doing. If you are stressed out, what are you going to look for? You're going to look for comfort. You're going to look for a quick dopamine hit, right? A lot of people, they comfort eat, right? So when they're stressed out, they're going to eat some chocolate. That is because when you're feeling low, you're feeling stressed out, you're going to look for a quick dopamine hit, right? That is the reward. If we're talking about the habit loop, the cue, the routine, the reward is that quick dopamine hit. So for a lot of people, it's junk food. For some people, it's smoking weed. For some people, it's watching porn. For some people, it's smoking cigarettes. For some people, it's drinking, right? It's all these things, right? These bad habits that give you a quick dopamine hit. So an example of reward, like I just said there, is sugar or substances. The thing that makes these quite dangerous, right, is because sugar and substances, so like nicotine, or like the chemicals you get from weed, things like that, they're powerful and they're chemically addictive, okay, which makes it a very hard habit to break. So when we're talking about you eating sugar, you need to understand that your brain is chemically, it's addicted to this thing that you're getting because you're getting them all the time and it's giving you this chemical release in your brain to make you feel that you want it more. It's giving you that dopamine hit. And we need to be aware, right? When we're stressed out, you're more likely to do the bad thing. We're more likely to do the thing we don't want to do when we're stressed out. So what do we do then, right? If stress is our puppet master, and when we're stressed out, we're more likely to do the bad thing. We need to keep our overall stress levels low, right? If we don't have the stress levels low, we're going to be struggling to adopt these new habits. We need the stress levels low to help you with the repetition, to help the new neurons fire and wire together, especially in the early phase when you're forming the new habit loop. So in this early phase of forming the new habit and replacing the bad one, if we're stressed out, it's just going to keep breaking the cycle of this repetition that we need.
Give them the quote, Kyle.
What is the quote? Cells that fire together, wire together, yeah. So if we're trying to fire and wire cells together, we're going to struggle with that if we're constantly being interrupted by stress and we're breaking this repetition through being a stressed out cunt and eating the chocolate. Okay, so repetition is a non-negotiable. In order for us to have repetition, especially at the early stages of forming a new habit, we need to keep the stress levels low. So when we're thinking about this then, right, we need to get good at practicing delayed gratification. What is delayed gratification? Can you tell us, Jack?
Delayed gratification is seeking reward that requires effort before actually getting that reward. Or
delayed gratification.
Delayed gratification. So that's what it is. Sacrificing with no reward to then gain that reward after
in a longer term.
The effort's been put in.
Yeah, so it's in this scenario, if we're being directly speaking about stress as your puppet master, delayed gratification and practicing that is when you feel shit, you're not gonna attack. You're not gonna search for what makes you feel good in the short term. You're gonna delay that gratification. You're gonna have the repetition to form the new habit, and you're gonna get that gratification in a longer term, right? So it's not looking for that short term hit of dopamine, grabbing the chocolate. You're gonna wait that out, repeat the new habit, and practice delayed gratification. It's very, very important to do this.
A real-time example for me for delayed gratification is when I wake up, not smoking a big fucking fat spliff and doing the business task that I said I would do.
Yeah, well, there we go. And again, that's
there we fucking go.
An experiment done, right? So this is called the marshmallow experiment, right? And they had children sit at a desk, right? And they had a group of children, different children from different backgrounds, etc. And what the adults done, the people that were doing the research, they went in and said to the child, I'm going to leave the room and I'm going to leave this marshmallow here. One marshmallow. If you don't eat this by the time I come back, I'm going to give you 2 marshmallows. So this is kind of pretty much asking indirectly the kids to practice delayed gratification. Some of the kids, when the people left the room, ate the marshmallow, right? And some of the kids didn't. So some of the kids did practice delayed gratification, some of them did not. What they actually found, right, they followed up with these children. I don't know if you've heard this, Jack, but they followed up with these children decades later. They done a follow-up experiment. The children that practiced delayed gratification were actually more successful in life. They had better uni degrees, they were making more money, and they had a better life, a better quality of life. They were more successful. And when they compared the children that didn't practice delayed gratification, the people that reached for that short-term gratification, they were not as successful. So it's crazy to see how the ability to practice delayed gratification and actually act accordingly with that, there's a direct correlation in this experiment to how successful you can be. If you're always reaching for short-term gratifications, you can even make sense of that in life in general. You're not going to be as successful long term.
To simplify it, I feel like it just simply comes down to most things that move the needle in your life and push you forward are things that you need to put the effort in first without any reward. So it's just as simple as choosing the harder option and the thing that will actually move you forward in what you're doing. Mostly the instantly gratifying things, instantly rewarding things are not something that's going to push you forward in any way. Hence why there's no effort required to scroll, snack or wank and all these other fucking pleasure-filled things. Even like what I was looking at the other day, like, a new car, might rewrap my other car. It's only really putting me backwards financially. There's nothing really moving me forward other than a little bit of ego fulfillment and pleasure and my car looking different kind of, do you know what I mean? So yeah, makes sense if you were to put it in that context of simply just comes down to the things that require effort, and no reward at the start that will actually move you forward in the long term.
Yep. So if there be a direct correlation between delayed gratification and being successful, we heavily advise you to practice delayed gratification. Things that can decrease your stress, right? Just to round off rule 1, is we could be sleeping better, optimize your sleep. Okay, meditation is a good thing as well. Organizing your time, you're more organized, you're not as stressed out about not having enough time. You're on your routine. You're really ahead of time. Reflecting often. Okay, so self-reflecting, what's stressing me out, being more aware of the things that are stressing you out, so you can take control and maybe cancel them out a little bit. And eating healthier. Okay, so a healthy diet is going to make you a lot less stressed as a person, because your gut, your microbiome has a big part to play in how stressed you are. So rule number 2.
Left.
Rule number 2, if Jack doesn't interrupt, is knowing your cues. Okay, so it's being aware of the triggers in your environment. So, for example, a cue that I had when it came to smoking is I would come home from college, whenever it was, I think it would have been college actually, and on my desk there would have been a grinder, skins and the weed. So that would be my cue to go into the routine of rolling a joint and getting the reward of getting high. So that habit loop that I had formed, the cue of the things sitting there, the routine of rolling it, and then the reward of smoking it, the cue was the shit sitting on the desk. So what I done was, when I wanted to cut down a little bit, is I put the stuff that would sit in plain sight on my desk, I would put it on a tray and I'd put it under my bed, and it wouldn't formulate this habit as often, and it allowed me to stop this kind of repetition of the bad habit. Okay, so if you've got a cue right now, if you've got a drawer in your house filled with chocolate, what you could do is you could replace that drawer with a drawer full of vegetables, of a drawer full of fruit. And it's going to take away this cue, this trigger of the bad habit of eating too much chocolate. Okay, that's a direct example you can take on. But we need to be clear of what the cues are. Okay, so knowing them can help you avoid them, like I just said there. All of your cues, all of the triggers that you have to these bad habits, they're all in your environment. Okay, so you, if you were to reflect, would be aware and would be able to be more aware of these cues so you can avoid them and cut them out. Your cues are actually the things that are holding your bad habits in place, okay? If you understand the habit loop, like I discussed before, the cue, routine, and reward, your cues and your triggers lead to routines that get to the rewards. So if we can eliminate the cues, we're not going to go into the routine and we're not going to get the reward of that bad habit. Okay, as I said there, if you remove a sweetie drawer for a healthy drawer, there's a direct impact, okay? If you take away that cue of having the drawer there, you're not going to go into the bad habit of eating the shite. I would also say, think about this. A cue could also be the people in your environment. So, for example, I had a group of friends back when I smoked too much. People would just be like, oh, do you want to smoke a joint, bro? That would be my cue to go and roll a joint and smoke it. They're enabling this bad habit. So be aware right now, are you spending time with people that enable your bad habit, whether it be drinking too much, whether it be smoking too much, whether it be eating too much shite? Be aware of this, cut it out. Rule number 3, don't focus on stopping bad habits, focus on breaking them. As I said there before, if you focus on stopping it, right, giving you an example, focus on stopping something often makes you rebound and do it more. A study showed that those who suppressed their thoughts about smoking made them think about smoking even more, right, which made them rebound and smoke more when they stopped, right? So if you're thinking don't smoke, you're still thinking about smoking, okay? The same thing was done with a study based on eating chocolate. If you're thinking, don't eat chocolate, and there's a lot of restriction, there's a lot of resistance, and you're trying to force yourself not to do something, you're thinking about doing it even more. It's the same way if I was to say to you right now, don't think of a pink elephant. You just thought of a pink elephant, so we cannot tell our brains to stop doing something without actually thinking about that thing more, which will only cause us to rebound, okay? You end up doing what you think about, okay? You become what you think about most of the time. So you need to focus on what you want to replace a bad habit with, right? Not focus on the bad habit you want to replace. So let's switch the focus to a new healthy habit. So if you are at nighttime scrolling, right? You don't want to think, I don't want to scroll. You want to think about what you can replace that with, which could be going a walk without your phone. Okay, so focus on going out a walk without your phone. And that's going to allow you to adopt that new habit easier and not have too much resistance, against the bad habit of scrolling. As I said, we don't want to remove it because this is going to leave a gap. If we leave a gap, the bad habit will just come back in again because it never dies, as I spoke about earlier in this podcast. Okay, so we don't want to just remove things out of our life because then there's a hole there. We want to remove it and quickly replace it with a new habit. As I said, thinking about quitting smoking will cause the brain to think about smoking, right? And like Jack mentioned about the 66 days to form a habit or change a habit, it's not true. This is completely individual to the person, right? So rule 3, don't focus on stopping bad habits, focus on breaking them. Don't focus on the bad habit you want to stop, focus on the new habit that you're going to form in replacement of that bad habit. Rule number 4, you need a better reason to quit. So even if you substitute a bad habit for a good habit, it can still come back, as it never dies, it never disappears, as I've said before. It's important that we have an intrinsic motivator that's genuine and personal to you. It needs to be genuinely and personally important to you for you to have this intrinsic motivator to do the thing, right? If there's a superficial reason, for example, a new habit for you could be eating healthier and going to the gym to get lean. If there's a superficial, shallow reason, for example, Ibiza in 12 weeks, once you come back from Ibiza, I would bet my left arm on it that you're not going to be back into that routine again because there's no intrinsic driver. There's no real intrinsic reason why. Give you a little example of a good intrinsic reason why. If you smoke too much and you get diagnosed with COPD, right? That is a life-changing disease that you could be diagnosed with by smoking too much. It's also life-threatening, right? So you could be thinking, right, okay, if that's life-threatening and I need health to live, that means that if I keep smoking, I could die. That intrinsic motivator, that intrinsic reason why would be, I need to stop smoking so I don't die. That would be a really deep, personal and genuine reason for you to stop. That intrinsic driver would be what can allow you to stick to the new habits and break the old habits, okay, even on days where you don't want to. So we need an intrinsic driver, okay, we need a genuine and personal reason why that we're going to stop doing these things, okay. You need to understand as well, right, change will happen when the pain of staying the same outweighs the pain of making a change, but you don't want to let it get to this. As I said, if you don't want to smoke until you get diagnosed with something that's life-threatening, because if you do get to that point, you're going to be filled with regret and guilt. So we do not want to wait until the pain of staying the same outweighs the pain of making a change. We need to understand that that is not where we want to get to. Let's think about a better reason to quit. Okay, so think about that now. When you listen to this podcast, we need to think about the reason why. Why are you fucking doing this? Make it genuine, make it personal, make it a deep intrinsic driver.
7 minutes remaining, cunt.
Rule 5. Willpower is not enough, okay? So, on days, you'll have certain days where your willpower is high as fuck and you're ready to smash it and you've got all this drive, and then you'll have days where your willpower runs out and you won't have it, okay? Why does willpower fluctuate, right? A study showed that it gets exhausted. So there's been studies showing that willpower will actually run out. It's not something that you always have 100% of. It actually will run out, okay? So there was 2 groups. There was cookies and veg put in front of these two groups, right? One of the groups were allowed to eat the cookies, right? They didn't have to eat the veg. The other group had to eat the veg and resist and really put restriction on themselves and resist against eating the cookies, right? So what this showed was the group that never had to use their willpower to not eat the cookies, so the group that got to eat the cookies, right? They worked for longer and didn't wear out as quick. So they put them through a test after it, right? I think it was, what was it? Let me see. So it was a riddle that was like a trick question. You could not figure out the answer to this. It was a trick question. There was no answer to this riddle, right? But the people that had resisted and weren't allowed to eat the cookies, they wore out and gave up quicker than the people that got to eat the cookies. The people that got to eat the cookies had more willpower to figure out the answer to the riddle. Obviously, there was no answer, but it showed that the people that had to resist didn't have as much willpower to go as fucking long as the people that got to eat the cookies. Right? Another study, 2 groups. One was asked to suppress their emotions, so they were watching a movie, right? It would have been like a sad or a happy movie, right? But one group was asked to suppress their emotions, and the others were able to respond how they wanted. The group who were asked to restrain themselves gave up sooner on a test after to do with physical stamina. This shows that willpower is a limited resource, right? So they were put through like a bleep test, call it a bleep test after it. The people that were allowed to just sit and laugh and fucking cry or whatever at the movie, they didn't have to use resistance and willpower not to respond emotionally. Those people done better in the physical stamina test, right? So it shows that, obviously physical stamina, yes, some people are fitter than others, but most of the time when you're running, if you ever went to run yourself, you need that willpower to keep going. When you don't want to go and you feel like you want to stop, you use willpower to keep pushing through and keep fucking running, right? So the people that had to use resistance against expressing emotions, they done worse off in the stamina test after the study. So it shows that the willpower ran out. So they used up all the willpower during the movie not responding emotionally, and they didn't have enough willpower to use in the stamina test after it, right? So this is just reinforcing that willpower is a limited resource. So the more pressure, restrictions and strain you put on yourself when you're trying to make new habits and break old habits, the less of the chance you have in achieving them. The more of a chance you have to rebound. So this is why crash diets don't work. This is why setting unrealistic goals do not work. So you get people at the New Year's resolution, right? And they say, I'm going to stick to the gym 6 days a week, but they don't even go any days a week before the new year. This is why no one fucking sticks to it, because it's unrealistic, right? So you need to make it sustainable and realistic, and they need to be small enough and achievable enough to sustain. So when you're setting these new habits, although yes, eventually you might want to completely stop smoking, right? You're probably better if you're a daily smoker, cutting it down one day at a time. You cannot go from smoking every day to zero days smoking. You're going to be very likely to rebound. So a direct example, if you're someone that smokes cigarettes or smokes weed every single day, or eats chocolate every single day, eat a little bit less, smoke a little bit less, and over time decrease that to the level where you would be happy to call it a habit that's not necessarily too bad, right? Because you might not want to completely stop smoking. Obviously, I would advise you to do that. But if you're smoking 7 days a week, cut it down for the next month to 6 days a week. The month after that, cut it down to 5 days a week. The month after that, cut it down to 4 days a week. Before you know it, you're going to be on 1 day a week, and then you're probably going to have new habits because you're going to replace the bad ones. And before you know it, these new habits will formulate your lifestyle, and you'll have a different life to live rather than having these bad habits in your life. So, rule 5, willpower is not enough, and understanding that means that we can set small and achievable goals, right, to set as new habits, and we're not going to fucking put too much restriction, too much strain, too much pressure on ourselves to adopt these new habits, okay? So willpower is not enough, rule 5. How long left?
2.5.
So we're talking about rewards, right? We cannot deprive ourselves of all rewards. We need to find new, healthier, and less addictive rewards. It's important to reward yourself in some way every day along the way. So if you're like, no, I'm not going to be smoking at all, you've got a lot of rewards from smoking, the nicotine hit, the weed hit, whatever you're smoking, right? The chocolate, for example. If we just remove all of that, right, it's not going to work. It's going to be counterproductive. We need to have some rewards at least every single day. And that could be the new habit of going to the gym. The reward you get is fulfillment. You get that kind of endorphin release from doing the exercise. That would be the new and healthier and less addictive reward that you could be replacing with that, or you could be replacing a bad habit with, okay? But it's important that we know that we need to reward ourselves every single day for that constant moving forward. As humans, we need the reward, okay? So don't deprive yourself of all rewards. This is going to be counterproductive. So, a bonus rule number 6 to round it off, okay? The secret power of posing a question, the question behavior effect is what it's called, okay? So, instead of you saying, I'm going to go to the gym, it's actually more effective for someone to ask you, are you going to go to the gym? If someone asks you, are you going to go to the gym? What this makes you do is it makes you reflect on yourself and ask yourself, am I someone that's actually going to go to the gym? And the egotistical part of you will say yes most of the time, right? This is going to be a powerful thing in order for you to go to the gym. So you can set this up yourself. You could write a note to yourself, write an alert, and the question would be on the alert, am I going to go to the gym today? Or you could be asking the people around you to question you on a daily basis or question you on a weekly basis and question if you are going to go to the gym. This causes you to reflect and ask yourself, who is the person I want to be? It makes you actually think about that new person you're trying to become, and it compares who you are now to that new person, and that comparison allows you to weigh up if you're actually going to be acting accordingly with that new person, or if you're not. And if you're not, it's going to feel shit, and you're probably going to avoid feeling shit, so you're more likely to do the thing that you're questioned about doing. making and breaking habits in 30 minutes.
Done. See you in episode 13 where we talk about accountability, motherfuckers.